Hello there. Sorry I'm a little late tonight. I had a few technical difficulties, so I apologize. What time is it? Just 4 minutes late. So tonight I'm going to talk about the first debate between Senator Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc. It was yesterday morning. What was it? The Mount Washington Valley debate. I remember doing that debate 2 years ago. So I want to, before I get into the analysis, there's a few things I want to say. One is, I'm doing this from the perspective of, the voters who will decide this election. And what I mean by that is, the reality is, there's 35 or 40% of voters on the left and on the right that are, the ones on the left are going to vote for Hassan. The ones on the right are going to vote for Bolduc. And there's about 20% or so, plus or minus, but 20% or so of the voters that will decide this election. It's about 150,000 people. So as I watched the debate, and I've watched it twice, and I made notes, and I looked at it from the perspective, okay, if I'm in the middle, if I'm an independent that leans conservative, an independent that leans more liberal, how am I looking at this? I don't want this to be, situation where I come on, I'm a conservative Republican, and I hit all the conservative talking points. So I'm trying to do an analysis that those in the middle, how they might have perceived this debate. So that's where I'm coming from here. I'm trying to provide meaningful information to people. The other thing I want to make clear, like I said, I'm a conservative Republican. I have donated to Don Bolduc's campaign. I've given him a max donation. So it's important for everyone to know that, just so you know that what I've done there. And then the other thing I think everyone should know is, I defeated Don Bolduc in the 2020 U.S. Senate primary. So there's my disclaimers. Let me start by saying, sort of demeanor. Senator Hassan is articulate and well-spoken, but she's really boring. I almost felt like, her tone of voice and her mannerisms, kind of puts you to sleep. And at one point in watching, I think the second time through is, you could play her talking this stuff at night when you're having trouble going to sleep. Just play her voice, and I think it would help you go to sleep. So that's sort of, but she's smart, she's articulate, she knows the subject matter, but she's just boring. Don is Don. I mean, he's a retired brigadier general, and he talks like a retired brigadier general, and he's very energetic, and that comes through. I think that turns some people off, quite frankly. Some people love it, but I think it turns some people off. And I think those in the middle, I think there's some risk there for him. So, and then I would say generally, Don tends not to get into very many policy specifics, particularly policy specifics to solve problems. So he's very good at saying how bad things are now, and they're really bad. We all know things are really bad right now. but when pressed by the moderator for specific policy kinds of proposals to solve some problems, Don didn't have many specifics. So let me just go through my notes and give you my sort of high points. And listen, gee whiz, 5 pages of notes here. So I'm obviously not going to be able to get through them all, but I'll try to hit some high points. Don, I think, effectively hit on how bad things are in the country right now with inflation, the economy, the issues on the southern border, and he talked about that in his opening, and everybody knows those things. What Maggie did in the opening was, tried to lay off the inflation issues, the economic issues, particularly inflation, trying to lay it off on big oil and big pharma, and really, really try to emphasize that much of what she has done in the U.S. Senate has been bipartisan. I don't know if I totally believe that, but I know her commercial's been running there throughout the debate. She mentioned legislation that she worked on that was bipartisan. So the first question was about inflation, and I think Don again pounded home the inflation issues, and as he should. I mean, inflation is a huge issue. It's a huge issue affecting granite staters and everybody, everybody in the country. He did say some things that I thought, somebody in the middle, an undeclared, a moderate Republican, a conservative Democrat, would sort of, wonder what the heck he was saying. But for example, let me give you an example. What I mean by that is the moderator set up the question that inflation is too much money, chasing too few goods. And, Don at one point said, we got to unleash American oil and gas. And I agree with him. I think we need to unleash American oil and gas because to me, in my opinion, that's a major contributor to inflation. But he said that would put more money into the economy, which based on how that question was asked, I don't think, was a good take on it. When Hassan was talking about this stuff, she said something that I think was a missed opportunity for Don. She mentioned how the Democrats have reduced the deficit, and that's a Democrat talking point that I think is misleading, and the reason it's misleading, you may recall at the beginning when Biden first came into office, the Democrats passed this $1.9 trillion pandemic recovery bill when the economy was already coming back, and many economists say that money wasn't needed because the economy was already coming back, and shoving that much money in the economy, really added to the inflationary pressures. Well, the Dems are saying, well, gee, they reduced the deficit in 2022, but the reason they reduced the deficit in 2022 was because they spent all that money in 2021. So, of course, I mean, because they spent so much money in 2021, they're now taking credit for reducing the deficit in 2022, and that's very misleading. And I think if that comes up in another debate, um, I think that's an opportunity for Dawn to call her out on that, because it's kind of like saying, hey, I'm a firefighter, and I put out that fire, but it was a fire that I set. So and so it's really sort of very misleading that the that the Democrats are trying to take credit for that. And I think informed, undeclared will see that and see that as misleading. The next, this talk about Social Security, and you got this big issue, that Hassan is saying that Don Bolduc has said he wants to end Social Security. You got all that going on. And she referred to this website, BolducFacts.com. So, of course, yesterday after the debate, I went and looked at that website. And yesterday morning, after the debate, there was no website. Big miss. Now, I looked this morning, and yes, there is a Bolduc Facts website. It has both video and recordings of things Don has said. Although the recording part isn't working, the video part is video with sound. So, and listen, it's I think as far as independents go, it's a huge, in my opinion, it's just a huge mistake to say anything other than, you're going to, and I believe the government should do everything they possibly can do to preserve Social Security and Medicare. So, I think that whole discussion, and Don, of course, says he never said that. There's video where you can go judge the videos for yourself. But it's a danger area for any politician as it relates to those voters in the middle, and quite frankly, those voters on the left and right, to talk about doing something with Social Security. The abortion situation and the Dobbs decision, and what's going on with that, a couple things about that. Again, from the middle voters, they tend to be pro-choice, and it's always a problem for those who are pro-life, like me, in a political situation, to deal with it. And I think it's a vulnerability for Don, and that's why the Democrats keep hammering it and hammering it. Now, to what extent will that outweigh the economic issues? I don't know. I think Don, he said something in this discussion that I think it's going to be one of those sound bites that end up on this Bolduc Facts page. He said that the Dobbs decision did not reverse Roe v. Wade, and it certainly did. It reversed Roe v. Wade, in fact, very directly and clearly. I think what he was trying to say was the Dobbs decision does not make abortion illegal in the United States. So, at any rate, I think the other thing is, Hassan made it now she didn't make it clear, she was pretty subtle about it, but that she believes that abortion is permitted up to the time of birth. And that's an extreme position. And I think those in the middle do not like the idea of abortion being permitted up to the time of birth. But she said it pretty subtly, and whether they pick up on it or not, I don't know. The there was this question about politicization of the Supreme Court, and which I thought, in this idea that perhaps the justices that were appointed by Trump, were concealing what they thought about precedent in the Supreme Court and how it related to Roe v. Wade. And Hassan went off into this discussion about dark money, and because when there's a Supreme Court opening, these groups spend a lot of money influencing people to support Supreme Court. She got into this discussion about dark money as it related to the politicization of the Supreme Court. And I just thought that wasn't very effective, especially for someone like her running for the U.S. Senate. And you've got all these outside money, all these independent expenditures coming in and supporting her and attacking Don. I just think that folks in the middle, I think, would see the hypocrisy in her saying that. I think, that question, I think the simple answer for Don would have been, no, the Supreme Court's not politicized. They just voted 9-0 against former President Trump with respect to the documents and that he took and all that. So I think the other thing about that, if you study the Supreme Court, you will find that a significant portion of their decisions, and I might even say a majority of their decisions, that the justices that are considered liberal and the justices that are considered conservative quite often vote together. So that whole question was a bit of a setup question that came from a liberal. And there were a lot of questions like that where the premise of the question, I think, was biased in favor to Hassan. And I think that was pretty obvious, and I think people in the middle will probably see that. The climate change question, I thought Hassan answered it pretty well. Like I said, she knows her policy. She's articulate. She's just boring when she talks. I think Don went off into his military career, and he said something there that I just, when he was serving overseas and in combat, they think about the environment. I don't know that made a lot of sense, and I think people in the middle would be scratching their heads on that one. The foreign policy stuff, and it led into an open border discussion. I thought Don made a really, really good point that these 87,000 new IRS agents and whatever it was, I don't know how many, I think $80 billion going to the IRS. That's, that would be better served to use that money to secure the border and add to the border patrol than IRS agents. There was a lot of back and forth about what Hassan has or hasn't done on the border, and I think I think that and the opioid crisis, and I think that Hassan's um, uh, discussion on that, I think, lacked credibility, and I think those in the middle who would hear that, uh, you know, would question, you know, her honesty on that. Having said that, I think that was a missed opportunity for Don. I think it was an opportunity for him to get into specific policy matters with respect to that, and this was, in my opinion, and I think those in the middle would react this way. It started feeling to me like, okay, all Don Bolduc is doing is hammering on Biden, hammering on Hassan, which is okay, but without coming up with any specific policy proposals of his own, or that the Republicans have that he would support to solve these problems. I mean, it's one thing to say, yeah, we have all these problems. I think it's a whole other thing. Well, how are you going to solve them? And I think that was a weakness for Don throughout this debate. And my suggestion to him in preparing for the other debates would be on these major issues to have some specific policy proposals, especially issues with respect to inflation and the economy. And I mean, those conservative Republican solutions are out there. We all know, the whole idea of unleashing, the American oil and gas industry and increasing the supply of American oil and gas will help get that part in balance, and that'll flow through to help reduce inflation. But there's got to be other specific policy proposals on that, and I would suggest that in his subsequent debates that he be prepared for that. Hassan, I think, has done a pretty effective job of stiff arming the Biden policies, and it would be good to have specific examples of, instead of always saying, Hassan votes with Biden 96% of the time, specific examples that it comes to the economy and inflation of the things she voted for that have added to inflation. And I think the same throughout. I think on all the abortion stuff, it's try that Don has to try to really hang around Hassan's neck the fact that this late term abortion is extreme. That policy is extreme, late term abortion. And then get away from the subject. So at any rate, I think I'm getting close to my 30-minute limit that I put on myself for these things. And thanks for joining. And, we're less than 3 weeks away from the election. Become informed, ask questions, read, send me an email. If you have any questions on policy or issues, and I'll do my best to answer them. So thank you so much for joining today. It was great. And get out to vote, get out to vote, get out to vote. Thank you so much.